you so much for joining me here on Resin Bell. Today I'm going to be working on Dumbledore's memory cabinet. It is a lamp, and I am recycling some things from an old laptop. I have taken the screen out and I am salvaging the Fresnel lenses. That's what this is. And the plastic screen, and I will be using that to make a little shelf, and it's a pretty thin piece of plexiglass basically, and it's going to come in handy for this build. So the next thing I'm going to be working with is a clock. I found this little dome clock at a yard sale and have had it for a little while. I think I paid like $2 for it, and I mainly got it so that I could reuse the glass dome on it. And I wasn't sure what I was going to use it for, but it turned out to work really well for this project. So I've taken all the clock parts out, and now I have the base and the dome, the glass dome. And I have my various pieces here that I may or may not use in this build. So on Amazon you can pick up a 50-pack of these plastic test tubes, and I think it's like $11.99 or something like that. But I am only going to be using about 17 of them, and I think these are going to come in handy. So far I have come up with the idea to use this little resin mold with some UV resin to create some bottoms for these test tubes. And this is the UV resin I'm using. And I've been filling up the mold about just a little under halfway for the base of the vial, the memory vial. And that seems to be plenty as far as width and to keep it sturdy. So once you've got that bottom piece, then you'll put a little drop of UV resin on the bottom of your test tube and then cure it with a light, and then you have this connection here, and it creates a great little base for the little memory vial. So for the top, I found these kind of broken Christmas lights at the Goodwill outlet, and I love the little glass tops, and so I pulled some off, and I am going to be using those as the little tops for my memory vials. I know it's not exactly the same shape, but there's a whole bunch of them and they look really cool. So then I just took these little plastic parts that were on them and just snipped it off. It was just like a little piece of plastic around the bottom of it. And so for the top of the memory vial, I used the same resin mold, and then I put some UV resin in it, but not as much as in the bottom. I only filled it about 1/3 of the way. And once they're cured, then you can take your tops, put a little drop of UV resin inside of the top, and set it down and cure it. So then I have the bottom and I have the top. Now, once this is filled, I can use some UV resin to connect the top to the vial. Here I am mixing a 2-part epoxy resin. Amazing Clear Cast is my favorite. It's always a good one to work with. You mix it 1 equal part to 1 equal part. And stir, stir, stir. Now I'm taking a little bit off to the side, and I'm adding some white eyeshadow or mica powder and a drop of white dye. And I'm mixing that up well. I want it to be nice and kind of pearlescent white. So I'm going to tape all these together so that they don't fall over while it's curing or while I'm filling them. So first I'm going to pour in the mixed clear resin, I'm going to pour some in each of the vials. Now with the pearlescent white, I'm taking a stick and I'm getting a little bit on the end of the stick and then pushing it down into the clear resin that I've poured and doing a kind of a swirl motion. And that gives it a nice little swirl of pearlescent white through the clear resin. Here I'm just adding a little bit more clear resin because I didn't have them full enough. And then I'm going to take my little stick with some pearlescent resin and just do a final little swirl there in the top to kind of mix everything. You don't want to do it so much that it mixes it all completely, but you want to have just a nice little swirly in there. Once that's cured, you're ready to put your top on. As you can see, the swirls inside the clear resin there. So now we're ready to put our top on. And we'll need some more UV resin. And I'm just dipping the top into the UV resin. And being careful to place it straight up and down. And holding it still, I can cure it with a UV light. Now I use my little UV torch to just kind of quickly hold things, and then I will pop them over into my UV lamp for a longer cure to be finished up. Here are all the completed vials. And they just kind of sound so cool. I'm pretty happy with how these turned out. They work just fine. You can make a lot of these for fairly cheap price. Now if you don't have the Christmas light toppers, you can always just find a pendulum resin mold or something like that, or a crystal resin mold, something that you can make a topper for yourself out of. So here I'm just determining the center of the base of that clock so that I know where my motor goes into the bottom. And I'm also using this as a reference to, as a template to cut the plexiglas that came out of that laptop. Center mark. And then I just traced around it so I have a nice circle. Here I am drilling the hole for the center. Now that the hole is drilled, I can put the motor through the bottom. This is just a little sync motor that you can get. I tried to salvage one out of the bottom of a microwave, but it turned out not to be any good, so I had to order one off of Amazon. They're pretty cheap. Now we're going to use the snowflake method that we all learned in elementary school to create some hand-cut labels for our vials. It's a pretty simple process. Fold a piece of paper into 4 and then draw a quarter of a design onto it with a pencil. You want to do it with pencil because you want to be able to erase your lines after you cut it out. Now just cut the designs out with an X-Acto knife. And cut the entire design out. Unfold it carefully, and you have a label. Now I'm using a Dremel tool to cut out the circle out of the plexiglass. As you can see, this method, it tends to melt the plexiglass a little bit, so you have to do some sanding afterwards. I don't have another way to cut plexiglass right now, so this is what I had on hand, and it seemed to work fine. I'm just using a really rough nail file to take down those rough edges and smooth the edges nice and neat. Here I'm creating a template for the top of the cabinet. I want it to be very kind of intricate and fancy. Here I've placed it on some foam core board, and I'm just cutting through all the lines on the template. I repeated that a few times for all the sides of the cabinet. Now, Dumbledore's cabinet had more than 5 sides, but since I'm working with a clock, I decided to go with less sides so that you can see the vials. If I added more sides than this, there wouldn't have been very much space in between to be able to see the memory vials. So this I picked up at Goodwill Outlet, and it's just a crystal candle holder. I thought the base looked pretty close to the cabinet that was in Dumbledore's office. So here I've just created a cone for the top of the cabinet, and I have reused the brass trim that was around the clock face. And then I've started to add some details with foam core. So as you can see on this foam core, I just cut the top edge so that it's bezeled, and they'll all fit together at the top to create a point. And once I glue this down, these will all set flat. And creating more details for the top of the cabinet. Reusing pieces as I can. And then these are the little sections that go between each of those things here, and I'm just trimming off that little piece of cardboard and creating a little roof line for each of those. And I did the same thing for these pieces as well. And because these pieces I have shaped them to be kind of circular so that they will lay flat on the domed glass, I had to trim the front edges of the roof lines. So here I've just got everything kind of setting up just to kind of get an idea of what it's going to look like and how everything's going to fit together. And here I've added some hot glue details. I've put some hot glued some beads on and added some spikes at the top of the roof lines as well. It looks kind of weird right now, but once it's painted, it'll look good. Trying to kind of mimic the details that are at the top of Dumbledore's cabinet. I used some toothpicks and some skewers, some wooden skewers in various sizes, and put little beads on top. Now once that hot glue has dried, I am sealing all of the paper with some acrylic paint because I did a test run and my spray paint would make the paper on the outside of the foam core bubble up, if it's not sealed up, so I used acrylic paint to seal it. And the spray paint just worked very, very well, and it's all golden now, and I just love how it turned out. All the details just kind of shine, and I think they look pretty cool. See this, I put some hot glue details on the front as well, just to add a little bit more interest. And I have spray painted the base as well, and started kind of laying everything together just to see what it looks like. Now I'm working on adding some color to my hand cut labels. And my hand cut labels, I used onion skin paper, some old onion skin paper that I had, and now I'm just using watercolors to add some aging and make them look a little older. Kind of uneven, just to make it look like they had aged in different ways. So those turned out pretty cool. I like that a lot better than the bright. Now I've just got to let these dry, and then I can write the labels. Here I'm working on putting a little bit of a foam barrier between the little motor, because if I don't, it sticks up way too high. I wanted it to be a little bit lower, so adding some industrial double stick adhesive to add a little bit of spacing between this and the bottom of the clock base. So I'm just lining it up, making sure that it's going to fit in that hole well, and sticking that onto the bottom. Now I've just kind of laying everything there so I can get an idea of height. Got it all wired up, and it's turning, and everything's working good. So now I'm putting the top piece on with the tiny little screws. And now it's turning. So on the bottom of or on the sides of the plexiglass base, I am adding some super glue and a little cardboard edge, just so you can't see the lights underneath. And here I am adding the lights, and I've got some LED light strips and in warm white, and I ordered those off of Amazon as well. And they're just basically a peel and stick. You peel the backy paper off and you stick them down, and you can kind of fold them up a little bit, and it doesn't hurt them at all. You just got to be gentle with them. And it works out pretty well when you're trying to do a circle. And there are special markings where you can cut this if it's too long, and I cut right between those markings, and so it'll still work. And this is what it'll look like. Now my memory vials will go on top of this bottom plate here. Now I want the center memory vials to raise up a little bit, so I made another little platform in the center, so I have a little bit of height difference, just to add interest. And these I glued on with some silicone adhesive because it's clear, and it worked out pretty well. So here I'm using a vintage ink and ink pen, and I'm just writing out some labels. I wrote what I wanted on each one with a pencil first, and I'm just basically going over it with the pen. So here are the finished labels. I went by some of the original labels from the movie for a lot of them, and for a few of the other ones, because I had more that are shown online, then I just kind of made up my own, like one for Lily Potter and one for Sirius Black and a few different ones. So here I'm just using some zip dry paper glue to adhere these onto the vials, and it works pretty well. Very, very happy with how these turned out. I'm definitely going to have to make some more of these. So here's the base, and I've got everything kind of set up just to kind of get an eyeball of how it's working out. Here I'm taking some of that double stick super strength adhesive, and I'm using it to attach these details onto the glass. Now once those are all attached, I created some of these little panels here to cover up that inside table from the outside, and to give it a little bit more details at the bottom as well. I kind of like how these turned out. So here's the finished Dumbledore's memory cabinet lamp, and I'm extremely excited with how this turned out. I'm very happy with it. If you enjoyed this video, if you enjoyed this make, please hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and leave me a comment below. And thank you so much for watching.